kind of the trajectory of where this season could potentially go.
Love for Maui? Yeah, I'm going to go back and brew it.
Back! We have no idea who Michigan is, who Notre Dame is.
What would make Evan a Notre Dame fan?
Free agency to the max.
Is Carr going to start next year and be on that list as one of the top guys? That's what I want to know.
Harbaugh was inventing NIL before it was a thing.
Come on, man. You got 100,000 things going. You didn't read my text?
Hold on. Do you think they beat him again?
That's the question.
Not if it's in South Bend. It's going to keep getting easier because there's going to be nobody to play because these conferences keep getting bigger.
Who's the better quarterback, Riley Leonard or Carson Beck?
I also want to be clear on, I think he has a job for a long time, but I don't think he wins a national championship.
The cathedral of college football. We'll see you in the next one.
Always share your brews.
Always share your brews.
Go Steve Goff.
Special playoff edition of the Varsity Brews Podcast. Vahid and Evan Sharpley. Brought to you, of course, our fine podcast here, the Varsity Brews Podcast, brought to you by WestWind Brewery, brought to you by Legacy Performance, and brought to you in part by Rustic Rocks. My man Evan Sharpley donning the blue and red today as they clinch the second seed in the AFC. Man, that's gotta feel good for those guys. But I have to ask though, we've been here before, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we keep talking about how the Buffalo Bills have home field last year. They win the AFC for the fourth or fifth straight year, and I mean, they got to get over the hump here.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to take that next step now in the playoffs. And, I think what was interesting going into this year, losing Stephon Diggs, I think a lot of people, myself probably included too, you weren't really sure the cast of characters that were going to step up. I mean, you knew Josh Allen, the caliber that, a quarterback that he is, and arguably, if not one of the top three, the best quarterback right now. You look at his 2-year run right now, it's over 50. I think it's 55 passing touchdowns and over 20 or 25 rushing touchdowns in the course of the last 2 years. So, when he goes, they go. Their defense played pretty well today against a not very good Jets team. What's nuts, though, about that, and this is a separate topic, but, Rodgers, really outside of today was a poor day, but going into today, his throwing stats were right on par with Josh Allen for the entire year, yet the Jets are 4-11. But, Allen certainly, he makes some big throws and gets it done with his feet, but you hit the nail on the head, Vahid. They gotta win in the playoffs. They got to get over that hump, and it's likely going to go through Kansas City, which they've proved that they're able to take care of business and beat the Chiefs earlier this year. But it's got to happen on the big stage. I think that they have the ability to do it. Really, it's going to come down to, will Josh Allen be Josh Allen, and then will their defense play consistent through the playoffs? You can't give up 44 points to the Rams and do that in the playoffs and hope to, have success. So it's going to be really interesting. But, I think given maybe, I don't know if the expectations were low going into the year just with new players, but they certainly seem to gel as a team and they've got something pretty good going. So it'll be interesting once we get into playoff mode here, what happens.
Well, everybody was saying Stephon Diggs. Losing him is going to be such a key to this team, and are they going to be the same team? I kind of relate it to the cheetah going to Miami, right? I mean, you find ways in good offensive systems to move past players, and who knows what kind of player or teammate he was in the locker room, but the status quo. You're right; they win the division, and I think we were all right about Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City, everybody's like, oh, they're winning games by 1 point or 2 points, or they're hanging on. They're winning. Who cares, right? I mean, they're winning games, and quietly, Mahomes is, 20 touchdowns, 19 touchdowns in his last 4 games, and they're undefeated, 3 games on the road. So, I mean, I still think the road to the Super Bowl runs through Kansas City. I mean, if you're going to win, you got to beat those guys. And now Buffalo made it harder on themselves by probably having to go to Kansas City this year like we saw in years past. But it's going to be an interesting AFC playoff picture, as I believe all the teams are set in the AFC. and we're still awaiting. Oh, no. Cincinnati and Indianapolis is out. They lost to the Giants, so they're out. So, man, Cincinnati winning 4 games in a row, they could sneak in here.
Yeah, I mean, Burrow's played really well all year. I mean, even in their losses, he's been putting up consistent numbers, and they've got a couple of dubs now, consistently moving through. The AFC's dangerous, man. I mean, you've got, between Cincinnati, you've got the Texans, the Ravens. I mean, and it's all really stemmed around quarterback play. I mean, you look at those teams right there, they've got stud quarterbacks. And I mean, that side is loaded. So whoever, I think, the AFC Championship game might be a more competitive game, really, or the road to get there than the Super Bowl itself, because, from top to bottom, I just don't think the NFC matches up with the AFC.
Well, and Detroit, Minnesota lock up the either the 1 seed or the 5 seed there. And then I believe Philadelphia locked up the 2 seed today with their victory. They're playing tough, man. And congrats, shout out to our boy Ian Book, who was on the who got called up this past week to Philadelphia. So he's in Philly once again.
That's awesome.
I didn't know if he was going to get in. I didn't see the fourth quarter, but Saquon got 2,000 rushing yards. So the NFC is all set, except the seeding there. We're going to find out here in the next week or two. But let's switch to college football, and let's talk about probably the must-see game of the college football playoffs so far. It's Notre Dame and Georgia from the Sugar Bowl. That's coming up this weekend, along with the other games. Penn State, Boise State, Ohio State, and Oregon. That's another good one in the Rose Bowl. And the final game is, why can't I remember that?
Arizona State and Texas.
That's it. Notre Dame is going into this matchup having really like one of the hottest teams in the country. They've won 11 straight games. Electric atmosphere at Notre Dame Stadium. You were there, and I'm eager to get your thoughts on what you thought that stadium. It was way different than I've ever seen it. I mean, noise level, electricity, just kind of like, hey, we're playing Indiana. It was just a different atmosphere. So I guess let's touch on that first before we get to Georgia. What did you think of that game and how Notre Dame played?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it, to your point, and I got there a little bit late. I showed up right about kickoff, and I went with Matt Shelton, which was really cool. Actually, one of our former teammates, DJ Fitzpatrick, he's in the food service industry, he had an extra couple tickets and hooked us up. So, we got to wait in line like peasants, and it was a good 20 to 25-minute wait just to get in. And there were several IU fans that were like, "Is this normal?" I was like, to be honest, I don't really know. I think it did take a little bit longer than most games to get in, but, a night game, the first college football playoff where, you have teams hosting at home sites, I think it's really cool. I know how it's set up now, and I have some suggestions that the NCAA is not going to listen to anyways, but I think continuing to do that, even into the second round would be pretty neat. Of course, my opinion is the top 4 teams should get the first round bye, not your conference champions. Anyhow, I digress a little bit, but yeah, it was a cool atmosphere. I think, with it being 2 Indiana teams, you had kind of that, hometown feel where there were a lot of people repping, both jerseys or had some IU ties, but were Notre Dame fans. I thought that the team at Notre Dame Stadium did a nice job just with different, with music, and, Matt and I were talking kind of through it, like, Matt played 4 years prior to me getting there, and then I was there his 5th year. And he's like, can you imagine, like, this is how it was, how it is now versus what it was like even 10, 15 years ago. There's been a lot of changes. The Jumbotron's really cool. When I went to an SEC game last year, I went to the Georgia-Tennessee game at Tennessee in Knoxville. And that stadium was electric and loud, and it helped the Tennessee. It was a 60-yard touchdown run, their first play from scrimmage. So that place was hopping. They also feed in noise. I wish that Notre Dame Stadium would do the same. So I'm not saying that it was overly loud to the point where it affected what was going on the field, but there was a much different feel. And I think that that's because it's a playoff. I mean, it's a playoff game. There's implications on the line. So in that regard, it was super cool. Obviously, under the lights at night, those games are always special. And going against another team from IU with, a little crap talk coming from the beginning, and, Signetti and kind of his aura as a coach and how he talks, I think added a little bit of that element to, of course, College Game Day being there, Shane Gillis being there. Even though I had several people message me and say that he said that one of his favorite players at Notre Dame was Jimmy Clausen on the pregame show. I was like, well, great. I can't be a Shane Gillis fan now. That sucks. But anyhow, yeah, it was cool. Unfortunately, my wife wasn't feeling too well and her, about to give birth. I took off at halftime and I stayed relatively warm because we stood the whole first half, which is very unlike a Notre Dame game. And I can't speak for the rest of the sections, but our entire section, we stood the entire first half. And that was pretty cool because I think, the cathedral of Notre Dame kind of gets that we're here to watch the game and be spectators and sit and not really participate. But I think there was more participation and, maybe chalk that up to a little extra tailgating time. I don't know, but it was a unique and cool environment. And it was great that Notre Dame was able to take care of business. Early on, you had a couple different momentum swings. IU, it seemed to me offensively never really got into a rhythm. So whether that was, their game plan and their execution or just, Notre Dame's defense is very talented. They weren't able to do a lot. I was surprised at, how poor the quarterback play was on IU's side. Really was not, it felt like he was forcing balls, following the Riley Leonard interception early on. IU had a tremendous opportunity to score and I think control momentum early on.
And silence the crowd.
Exactly. And, they pick up a big chunk play on a pass. I think a PI call as well. And then he forces a ball across the middle that's intercepted. And then you have a 97, 98-yard touchdown run. And that really changed the course of the rest of the game. I was watching pretty closely at the line of scrimmage. I don't think either team was tremendously dominating. There was a little bit of back and forth. Where IU had success running the football was off tackle, zone read, stretch type plays. And for whatever reason, they kept going back to kind of these middle runs where they weren't working. They went two off tackle plays for, I think it was an 8-yard gain, 6-yard gain. And then they went back to throwing the football and then an inside draw that didn't work. So, I don't know what their game plan was, but when we got to half and I was talking with Matt about it, I was like, if they want to, put together some long sustained drives, they've got to continue with these off tackle runs because that's where they were hurting Notre Dame up front. But they didn't do that. And then, of course, when you get behind the 8 ball, their punter was, I think he took the day off, and giving Notre Dame some good field position in certain times, and you're playing, ball control. And then a big field goal there before halftime, I think, pumped up, Notre Dame some confidence from the special teams unit where it really felt, they were in control of the football game by that point. So it really was what we've seen the last 11 games, Vahid, has been, aside from the initial interception from Leonard, it was minimizing mistakes and letting your defense go out there and get off the field. And if Notre Dame is able to do that against Georgia, they're going to be in the football game. And so, they know who they are. They have their identity. I sound probably like a broken record because I've said it the last 6-7 weeks is they understand who they are, their game plan, and it's just going out there and executing and not making, big grievous mistakes. And outside of that early turnover, which was negated then by an interception by the defense, they played a pretty clean game. So that was good to see, good to get that win. Of course, now the stakes increase and you go down to New Orleans and you're playing in a fun environment against an SEC team. And they have a chance. Like I said, if they play their style of football, they're going to be in the football game. And if anybody watched Georgia versus Wake Forest, I think, if you're an Irish fan, you should feel optimistic about the result of this game if they're able to go and do what they need to do.
Well, yeah, and I think we talked about it all season long is how would Notre Dame fare against SEC? Would they stay in the game? Would they get blown out? And I've seen a lot of mixed results on social media so far with people chirping about, Notre Dame's getting Georgia at the right time, like that kind of talk. I don't agree with that at all. Georgia's still Georgia. Doesn't matter if Gunnar Stockton's at quarterback or, whoever. I don't think that's the mentality you have if you're Notre Dame going into this game. You're also down one of your top linemen who really stepped up this year, and Riley Mills. I mean, that is the one thing that I think really could hurt Notre Dame going into this game is the running plays of Georgia. Do they go off tackle, kind of use that same blueprint that Indiana started to go with and pound it up the middle now because you don't have your biggest guy there. You don't have Riley Mills. You stay away from the passing game. You control the clock. Let's just not forget Georgia, I think, those two games against Wake Forest and, the Georgia Tech game, I think those are anomalies. I think the Georgia that we've come to see in the last 2 or 3 seasons, I mean, that's the Georgia that Notre Dame should expect to see on the field on New Year's Day. And I think if they're expecting anything less and play to a substandard, performance that we're used to seeing, and they get off to a slow start, I think watch out. That's not a good combo for Notre Dame in this game.
Yeah, they've got to come out and start strong. You can tell a lot by how a game's going to go in the first couple drives. Who's controlling the line of scrimmage. And I'm with you, Vahid. I think, with an inexperienced quarterback in Gunnar Stockton, I think that they'll probably lean on, their running attack early. One thing, though, that Notre Dame has done a pretty good job of, and I saw this firsthand in person in the IU game, was Notre Dame's not afraid to play man coverage. And load the box and, have Xavier Watts do his thing and come in and run Phil. And so my hope is that that's the game plan that they decide to use. I would hate to see them play some type of zone coverage and allow Georgia to run the football. So if the IU game is any indication of what Notre Dame's comfort level on the defensive side is, I think we'll see man coverage. I think we'll see the safeties low in the box helping with the run. And then it's going to come down to, can they make some plays in space and negate the running attack? Because then, you're putting a lot on an inexperienced quarterback's shoulders to then win on some one-on-one matchups. And you're right. There's no reason for Notre Dame to think, we're catching Georgia at the right time. They've been here before. Kirby Smart knows what he's doing. You look at the last 5+ years, they aren't, they know what the playoff, even though it was a 4-team playoff previously, they understand the ramifications. They've been in the big moments. All these guys that have been that are on the roster have been either part of those teams or, in a role where they're watching and going through those. So, I think a little bit too for Notre Dame with this being new is not letting the moment get too big. Get your blinders on. This is a business trip. We're going down here to take care of business, and preparation has to be that way. This is a little bit of uncharted territory because you've got a Wednesday game. So it goes off what your normal weekly procedure is in terms of game plan and understanding how you're getting through that. So I think if they're able to, the coaching term is always avoid the noise, and that does ring true here where it's, just continue with your normal preparation, the game plan, the identity that you guys, have established throughout this year, but certainly don't take Georgia lightly. And I wouldn't think that they would, but we'll learn a lot in the first couple drives, I think, on both sides. Who's controlling the line of scrimmage, and then, does Notre Dame stick to their game plan defensively and playing man coverage and trying to stop the run, which I think they should do. And then, of course, it's going to come down to, making adjustments. And then really it's going to be that chess match, whether it's after the first quarter at halftime between Kirby Smart and Marcus Freeman on, who is going to be the master adjuster and making some of those small tweaks that we didn't see Cignetti and IU do going into the second half.
Well, I mean, look at the adjustments that Georgia made, even though they lost the game. Look at some of the adjustments they made against Alabama on the road at the half there in Tuscaloosa when they played early in the season, and that was early in the season. Again, you have Gunnar Stockton, who didn't put up huge numbers against Texas, but again, we talk about it with Kansas City. They just win. So I mean, you're kind of like, it's apples to oranges. It's like, okay, well, maybe they don't play their best ball, but they're winning games because they know how to win games. That's my concern with Notre Dame going into this game, if there was a big concern. They've overcome injuries all season on the offensive line, on the defensive line. They're playing without two of their best pass rushers. They have been with one of them all season long. And so going into this game, you're like, well, they can probably overcome that too. But overcoming a slow start and not playing their game, I think every single game to this point, I've said somebody on the defense is going to be the X factor. We know that Jeremiah Love can break one, right? I mean, he can break an 80, 90 yarder at any time during the game. We know that, the defense is going to play a solid game, and they're going to, they're going to have their scheme. They're going to play it, and you can depend on Xavier Watson, Christian Gray, and some of the other guys back there. What we don't know, and I want your opinion on this, is what type of game, and this is my X factor, is Riley Leonard. Because we saw how timid Riley played early in the season. When you put this type of pressure on a quarterback, and they've never been in this type of situation before, what goes through his head? Does he start playing tight again like we saw maybe early in the season? And how does he avoid doing that?
Yeah, I think there's certainly something to that. I think my concern would be is if there's a slow start and they get down 2 scores, and then you can't rely on that 90-yard run. I mean, you can, but you're probably going to change your offensive game plan a little bit because you're now not really playing within the realm of, your identity and what this offense is built to do, which this offense isn't built to play from behind. And I think you can credit that a lot to the defense too, and the offense knows that. So that would be my concern, is if Notre Dame gets down a couple scores early and they have to kind of go off plan on what they want to do offensively. And I don't think, I understand your sentiment and kind of your question with Riley Leonard, but I don't know if it'd be so much the moment. I think these guys, they prepare for that. They've played in front of big crowds. As long as they're not changing, and there hasn't been a tremendous amount of off time, right? There's, what is it, a week and a half between games?
Right.
So, it's not like they're waiting a month in between games. There's still a little bit of a longer lag than normal. But, unless I'm totally off and he has, a complete brain fart and comes out and is doing things he hasn't done the last 10, 11 games, I think we're probably going to get the same Riley Leonard that we would expect. But, yeah, again, I just get back to, it's got to be controlling the momentum and surviving the early flurry. Both teams are going to try to come out and smack each other in the face, and then it's going to be who reacts to it the best. So if Notre Dame's able to survive the early flurry, it then becomes, we can play with these guys. That's the mentality. If they get down a score or 2 scores early, you start to kind of that's when the doubt creeps in a little bit. And certainly then you're not playing your best football. So survive that early flurry, then you know that you can go toe-to-toe with anybody for 4 quarters.
And I really like the fact that Notre Dame has played an SEC team on the road in a hostile environment already, and that it was the beginning of the season. So, as it relates to, is the moment too big for them? I don't think so. I think it's Notre Dame playing Notre Dame football. I mean, if Notre Dame plays their brand of football and they are successful in running the ball,
they'll be in this game.
They'll be in the game, but their defense will allow them to be in this game against Gunnar Stockton, who is obviously new to this environment too. So let's not count that out either. He's new to this environment.
And so, I think where my head's at right now, all things considered, an inexperienced quarterback for Georgia, Notre Dame's stellar defense, this may come down to turnovers and special teams.
Well, turnovers Notre Dame can create. Special teams, it's a disaster. I mean, yes, their punt block unit has been getting to the punter and forcing the punter to do, Indiana game, for example, Georgia Tech. I mean, go back on the season, Navy, uncharacteristic things, but, you're not going to catch a Georgia team off guard. And if you're not cashing in on opportunities in the red zone or field goal attempts, those are wasted opportunities, in my opinion, that could come back to haunt you. And Jeter has not been on cue since early in the season. He has not been on target, and that's a concern of mine too.
Yeah, I mean, it could come down to, some flips in field position with the punting units, and then, you're right, who's able to get points. It's, if you're in field goal range, you got to make your field goals in this game, because I think again, if I'm looking, 30,000 feet broad view, two fairly similar teams right now in makeup. And, those are the small things, is controlling the football, flipping field position with the punting unit, and then when you're in scoring range, you got to get points. Even if you're not getting touchdowns, you got to get points.
Well, and don't look now, Notre Dame and OSU, the favorites to win the national championship, and how quickly we forget about Ohio State. They were able to get it done handily against Tennessee. Let's go to our picks. Who you got, Evan? A rematch of an earlier season contest between Oregon and Ohio State.
So I'm going to take Oregon again. Ohio State is hot, though. I think that, if they roll out the same game plan they had against Tennessee, which was to allow Will Howard to throw the football, which they didn't do against Michigan, I think that they will likely have success. It just seems to me, until somebody puts Oregon in their place, I got to pick Oregon. I think top to bottom, they just are a very polished football team. I like Dan Lanning a lot. I think he understands the preparation and how to connect with the players. So I'm going to pick Oregon. But I think it's going to be a good football game. I mean, you look at that bracket, even though Ohio State, handily beat Tennessee, for me, that was the toughest path was Ohio State, Tennessee, now Ohio State, Oregon to get to those final four teams. So I'm going to pick Oregon. I've got Texas beating Arizona State there. So you'll have a Texas final and part of the final four. And then, it's a little bit, for me, a little bit trickier. Boise State, I still don't know really what to think. They've, clearly, I don't want to say a one-trick pony, but, they are going to, I think, live or die by running the football, but no one's really contained that yet. We've got, Boise's playing? Why am I blanking? Boise's playing?
Penn State.
I mean, Penn State.
A different team when they're not at Happy Valley. Different team.
They are. It's like, I think I want to pick Penn State, but it's like, I feel like in these moments, and you look at Franklin's record against top tier teams in big games, it's not very good. That one's a bit of a coin flip for me, to be quite honest. I think as we sit right now, I'm going to pick Penn State. Clearly, if they're not able to stop the run, they're going to have some issues. And then I'm going to pick Notre Dame against Georgia. I think that they're playing good ball right now. As long as they stick to the script and they don't get off of that, they're going to have an opportunity to win. And they've got, and you've been saying it really from day one, Vahid. I've got to give you your props there. This is a championship defense. I'll be honest, they've proven me to be a liar. I really didn't think they'd be able to overcome their offense for an entire season. I thought that they lose a second game, but week in and week out, man, they get off the field on third down and they create turnovers. And I can't tell you how much that matters for an offense who is, sporadic at times.
Mm-hmm.
To allow them to settle into who they are and do what they need to do to win football games. So Final Four, I've got Texas and Oregon, and I've got Penn State and Notre Dame.
That's a good Final Four. I'm going to start with Ohio State and Oregon. I think Penn State I think Ohio State's on a mission right now.
They're hot, man.
They're hot, and they sort of figured things out after getting bullied around by Michigan. What did we say after that game? They should have thrown the ball. Why are you not playing your offense and throwing the ball? That's exactly what they did against Tennessee.
They were trying to beat Michigan at their own game to a fault.
And I don't know if we've seen Ohio State's offense open it up like that since early in the season. And I think they're going to do the same thing. I think Oregon's been living on the edge here for a little bit. And, if they're going to go, I think Oregon's going to need to keep up with the track meet. It's going to be a high-scoring game, and I think it's going to be tough for Oregon to find points at the end of the game. I'm going to pick Ohio State on this one. I think they're on a roll and they're on a mission. I'm going to pick Texas. I don't think Arizona State finds that next year. I think Texas is kind of destined for that Final Four spot. They've been playing good football too. I'm going to pick right now. Penn State's been living on the edge every single game too. I mean, like they're just so tough to pick. Plus, I just really don't like Penn State away from Happy Valley. I think they play a completely different brand of football when they don't have 117,000 fans on their side. But I'm going to pick them against Boise State because Boise State has one brand of offense, and that's running the football. So I'm going to pick Penn State there. And for the first time all season, I think people are going to be shocked. I am not going to pick Notre Dame in this game, which is crazy that you are picking Notre Dame and I'm not picking. I think a couple things scare me. Number one, I think it's Notre Dame losing Riley Mills. I think they've basically have played really well despite all those injuries all season long. I think losing another pass rusher is really, really tough. Not tough against Indiana and Purdue, tough against Georgia. And I think you're playing an SEC team that has had a lot of time to prepare. I know that they've had some time off since the SEC championship. So, again, it's going to be, how does Notre Dame start this game? If they start the game like they did against NIU, we're going to be talking about what a great season it was. Hey, congratulations, you made it to the quarterfinal and blah, blah, blah. But I think that they get off to a fast start. I think it could be a good game. And again, the special teams scares me. You leave points off the board. I think against a Purdue team you can manage. Against an SEC team who has been there before and is the back-to-back champion or whatever, won two out of the last three or whatever, you're not gonna phase a team like that. I just think Notre Dame's kicking game comes back to bite them at the end of the day. I really do think they're one of the top 5 teams in the country. I think they got a bad deal. They got a bad bracket and bad side to the bracket where they have to face Georgia as the 7 seed. And, I don't think Georgia's going quietly. So my 4 teams are Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State. And then if you go further from there, I got Georgia over Penn State, and I got Ohio State over Texas just because I think they're playing better football. And then I think it's going to be a doozy for the championship.
I like those picks.
Can't believe I'm picking against Notre Dame. I'm going to hear about this. But I think it's going to be a good game regardless. I mean, that's what you're hoping for, right, if you're a Notre Dame fan. But I do have one question before we wrap this up. If Notre Dame does, in fact, lose this game, was it a successful season?
Yeah. I mean, I think that they would have done better than I predicted. They've already done that. I thought they'd have 2 regular season losses, maybe get in. If we go back and look at my preseason predictions, that's what I said. So, for them to make the college football playoffs, only lose 1 regular season game, they've won 1, and then to lose to Georgia, who's won 2 out of the last 3. Sure. I think it's a successful season. And I think probably based on your argument, too, if you would now pull the new generation of Notre Dame fans, they would say it's a successful season, too.
Well, hosting a college football playoff, the first ever college football playoff game with the new format in your backyard. I mean, I think just because that happened and they beat Indiana, I mean, I think you left it on a high note. Looking at this bracket and looking on you picked Notre Dame. So de facto, I'm assuming that you picked Notre Dame to go to the national championship game because they would in fact beat Penn State.
I mean, that's the thing is I think if Notre Dame's able to beat Georgia, they're able to get to the national championship game. Because you look at the top part of that bracket, 3 of those teams, I could make arguments that could make it to the championship game: Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State.
Correct. Can you imagine a Notre Dame Ohio State rematch in the national championship? Where's Lou Holtz now? Is what we're gonna the T-shirts that we want to get. Where's Lou Holtz now? Well, good stuff, man. Anything else for the good of the order before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so.
Well, it's going to be a fun 2025 for the Varsity Brews Podcast, by the way. We've got some good things coming your way in 2025. All new guests. We're going to have some new sponsors, which we're excited about, and a new look and feel. So we're really, really excited about that as we kind of continue to, we're working on our, 3rd year, I guess. So it's some good stuff and hopefully a lot more live content, in the coming months.
No doubt. Hey, I know Christmas is already passed, but Merry Christmas. Have a Happy New Year. Enjoy some R&R with the family, and let's have a great 2025.
Hey, man, absolutely. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you, I'm sure, in New Orleans, because we'll be there taking photos since we can't take any video, courtesy of the college football playoffs. So we're going to be taking some iPhone photos. No, I'm just kidding. All right, my man. Thank you so much. This is the Varsity Brews Podcast, brought to you by WestWind, brought to you by Rustic Rocks, and, of course, our good friends at Legacy Performance. Until next time.
See ya.